Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another episode in our series called Fly Casting. You know, in our last episode, we talked about a really important problem that a lot of people face, and that's called creep, or coming forward too soon on the fly cast. And we talked about how this causes all kinds of problems, but most notably, it's going to cause tailing loops, and then it's basically going to cause your forward cast or your down cast to crash and burn on the water. A great way to think about this is if it doesn't straighten out behind you, it's typically not going to straighten out in front of you. Your forward cast or your down cast typically can kind of be a report card, and if it doesn't straighten out in front of you, it doesn't straighten out behind you. So I think we all understand that now. We've covered the concept of creeping forward too soon. In fact, my mentor, whom we mention a lot, and by the way, is going to be a confirmed guest on this series, Flip Pallet, he used to tell me all the time when I would creep forward, he would say, Brian, that was half of a cast. And he was absolutely right. I was coming forward too soon. I was making half a cast, like a baseball pitcher winding up to throw a baseball pitch and throwing it only from here instead of from full wind up, okay? If you really think about it, it's the same concept as starting with your rod tip in the water or on the ground. You make a full upcast. You also want to make sure that you make a full forward cast, okay? So let's take this one step further today, and I'm going to show you how you can also wind up on your forward cast and make a full forward cast, or in other words, wind up just like that baseball pitcher, okay? So one of the most striking things that really I ever heard come out of Flip Pallet's mouth was, he said, Brian, he said, you've heard people say not to break your wrist. And he said, if anybody ever tells you don't break your wrist, he said, run from them because they don't know how to properly teach a fly cast. And I tell you, he was exactly right, but I want to make sure that this is very clarified, okay? In order to make a really good fly cast, for example, a long cast, a very tight loop, or anytime you're casting a very heavy fly, or a sinking line for that matter, you must break your wrist. But it's very important to break your wrist at the right time, okay? And here it is. Basically, you're going to form your loop, okay? And we're going to talk more about this in the coming episodes. You can go to episode 14 of Getting Started in Fly Fishing and get the basics on how to form the loop using a 90-degree arc or a rod tip in a straight line path, etc., etc. So you're going to form your loop and make your upcast, okay? And then at that point, while the line is stretching behind you, now is the time when you're going to break your wrist. You're simply going to relax your wrist backwards, okay? And you might start off practicing this just by going a few inches back, okay? So you form your loop, you relax your wrist backwards ever so slightly, okay? And this is allowing you an amazing, call it wind up, okay? That's going to supercharge your fly rod. Literally, you're going to get twice the value, 3 times the value out of your fly rod if you wind up on your forward cast. And that's simply and easily done by simply relaxing your wrist or breaking your wrist. I know that Flip really stresses the fact that if you're trying to make a very challenging cast or you're casting a heavy fly, he's going to tell you, and he will in this series, that you're going to form your loop and then you're going to drop your rod all the way to parallel. All the way to parallel so you have a perfectly straight line between the rod, the line, and the fly. And then when you begin to come forward, instantly you're bending that tip of the rod, bring it back up to the loop forming plane, and then there you go. You're going to be able to cast to the next county no matter what you're doing, even with a heavy or very wind resistant fly. again, if anybody tells you don't break your wrist, they don't understand the proper way to make a forward cast and get the value out of your fly rod. Now, it's very important that you understand that you do not, in fact, break your wrist during the loop formation. In other words, you don't want to keep your arm stationary and break your wrist here. For beginners learning to cast, and in our beginner fly casting classes, that is true. You don't want to break your wrist here during the loop formation, because that's going to take you way past 90 degrees. It's going to take your rod tip off of a straight line, and you're going to have a big fat wide open loop. So you do not break your wrist during the loop formation. You break it after you have stopped the rod and while the line is unrolling behind you. Okay, so you stop the rod, you relax your wrist backwards, and then begin the forward cast. Bring it back up to the loop formation, 90 degrees, rod in a tip in a straight line path, and you execute the forward cast. When you really look at this, I've said it many, many times, and it's true. The upcast and the downcast, or in other terms, the back cast and the forward cast, are exactly the same thing in the opposite direction. And in one of our previous episodes, I told you that one of the most important things you can do is start with your rod tip on the ground, okay? You start with your rod tip on the ground, get it moving, form your loop. Now, you're going to basically do the same thing. You're going to put your rod tip on the ground behind you, get it moving, and then execute that loop formation. And again, you're going to triple the value of your fly rod, supercharge the load, and you're going to be able to cast large flies at amazing distances, I promise you. You know, here's a cool way to think about this. Remember when you were in kindergarten and they told you to, if you ever caught on fire, as if like 9 out of 10 children were going to spontaneously combust at some point in their life, but they taught you if you ever caught on fire, remember? Stop, drop, and roll. And you can really apply that to your fly cast, okay? You're going to stop the rod tip and that forms the loop and it begins to unroll behind you. You're going to drop your wrist, just relax your wrist backwards. Yes, break your wrist, okay? And then you're going to roll. You're going to get the rod tip moving, bring it back up to the loop formation, straight line path, form your loop, and off you go. Stop, drop, and roll. You're going to be amazed at what this does for your cast, and I can't wait to hear from you. Now, on a side note, a lot of people have chimed in, especially on our episode on how to prevent tailing loops. And they have said, oh, well, Brian's making tailing loops on every cast he makes. Well, friends, it was a video designed to prevent tailing loops. I promise you that I am not throwing tailing loops. And here's what you're seeing, and I understand it can be a little deceptive, but if you look at Blaine Chocolate, Flip Palette, you look at any modern day really great fly casters, you're going to see this phenomenon. And what's happening is, yes, I'm making an upcast, okay? I'm making an upcast, the line is unrolling. But then as I break my wrist and drop it back, it comes down to a lower level than maybe you're accustomed to. And then when I bring it forward, in a lot of shots here on our videos, you're going to see that the line is coming under the rod tip. Again, look at a recent advertisement by TFO and watch Flip Palette and Blaine Chocolate, and you're going to see the exact same thing. The line comes under the rod, but then I promise you, as it starts to travel out, it goes above the standing end of the loop, and it's a very, very tight loop. I promise you, I'm not throwing tailing loops. In fact, this technique is designed to prevent tailing loops. So when you see that line coming below the rod tip, it's because I have dropped that rod tip back, and you see it right there. It comes below the rod tip. But as it travels out, and I'm sure we're going to be able to show you this here on camera, that by the time it reaches the front end, there's no tailing loop. In fact, it's a very tight loop, okay? Break your wrist. Wind up like a baseball pitcher. You form your loop, you stop, you drop your wrist, and you roll. One final note is that a lot of people have tried to teach this technique, and a lot of people promote this technique, but they talk about stabbing the rod way back here, is reaching your arm way back. Okay, you're gonna see this a lot. And in fact, for a few years, Lefty Kreh had a video out, and he actually called it the Lefty Stab, where he stabbed it way back so that he could start from that way back position, or lengthen his runway, or wind up like a baseball pitcher. Well, as I started studying, I had a chance, it was about 1997, and I sat at the Texas Roadhouse, which is about 5 miles from here, with Lefty having dinner, and I said, Lefty, what's up with the stab, the Lefty Stab? I don't get it, I don't think it's correct. And Lefty said, Brian, he said, I was wrong, and I took that video off the market. And kudos to Lefty, he understood that that was incorrect, because by stabbing the rod way back, you're moving the fulcrum point, and actually, although you're starting the cast from back here, and you are gaining load and bend, you're moving the fulcrum point, which takes away. So it's really not a very good way to do this. You've heard me say it before, we're gonna touch on it a lot in these videos. The more you can keep that fulcrum point stationary, which is your elbow, the better off you are, the more you're gonna bend the fly rod. That's how a fly rod was designed to be used. That's really simple 7th grade physics. Keep that fulcrum point stationary. If you don't fully understand what I mean by the fulcrum point, well, by definition, the fulcrum point is the point or support on which a lever turns. And the fly rod is a flexible lever. I believe this is the most misunderstood and the under-taught portion of fly casting, period, in the world of fly fishing. It is so very important for you to strive to keep the fulcrum point as stationary as possible, and that fulcrum point is your elbow. You've seen me put my elbow on my knee before. It's a fantastic way to practice, and you should practice that way too, and keep your elbow as stationary as possible. I know it's not always a possibility to keep it perfectly stationary, but the more you can keep that elbow stationary, the better. Lefty used to say, keep your elbow on a shelf, keep your elbow at that point, and the fly rod's gonna do a lot more work for you. So instead of stabbing the rod back, keep the fulcrum point stationary, and you can achieve the same results by simply dropping that wrist, relaxing that wrist, or stop, drop, and roll, okay? So try it, practice it. Start by just dropping your tip back about 4 or 5 inches, and then eventually get to the point where you can take it to parallel, stop, drop, take it to parallel, form your loop, come forward. You're gonna throw this to the next state if you get this technique down properly. So, thanks as always for watching. Stay tuned, because we've got tons more coming at you that's gonna greatly improve your fly casting. Hey! How would you like to be the greatest fly caster in modern history? Well, I'm here to tell you how. Get yourself the Scientific Angler's Fly Line Cleaning Kit, which comes with this handy dandy fly line cleaning pad, double-sided for your convenience, and fly line cleaner and lubricant. Couldn't be easier. You'll run your fly line through the cleaning pad, scours off the dirt like you've never seen before, and then a little dab will do you of the fly line cleaning solution. You run it through, and just like butter, bada book, bada bing, you, my friend, will be a superstar. Scientific Angler's Fly Line Cleaning Kit, available at madriveroutfitters.com. Get you some, and you'll be a superstar. If you like this video, hit subscribe. It helps out a lot. And check out these videos. We think you might like them too.